Ramadan is the month Allah personally chose, and that choice alone gives it a rank no other time can reach. Its greatness is not because of cultural tradition, long fasting hours, or communal routines, but because Allah Himself selected it as a sacred season for drawing closer to Him. When Allah chooses something, it is elevated beyond ordinary standards. Just as He chose certain prophets, places, and moments over others, He chose Ramadan to be a time where mercy is poured out more generously. Forgiveness is easier to attain, and spiritual doors are opened wider than usual. This divine selection means Ramadan is not just another month that happens to include fasting. It is a carefully appointed opportunity designed for the soul's revival. Allah's choice of Ramadan reflects His mercy toward human weakness. People struggle with consistency, discipline, and sincerity throughout the year. But Ramadan arrives as a divine intervention, a pause button on distractions and a reset for the heart. When Allah chooses a time, He also places within it special help. That is why during Ramadan, worship feels lighter, sins feel heavier, and the heart becomes more alert. The spiritual environment itself changes, making it easier for a believer to turn back to Allah even if they were distant before. This is not coincidence, it is the result of divine selection. The fact that Allah chose Ramadan also means ignoring it is a serious loss. When something is handpicked by the Creator, it is never random or replaceable. Missing out on Ramadan's potential is not like missing an ordinary opportunity. It is like turning away from a personal invitation from Allah. The month comes with built-in reminders, fasting, night prayers, Qur'an recitation, all nudging the believer toward awareness of Allah. These reminders are signs of Allah's care, not burdens. Ramadan's structure itself proves that Allah wants good for His servants and wants them to succeed spiritually. This divine choice also explains why Ramadan has remained central to the lives of believers for centuries. Cultures change, churches evolve, and societies shift, yet Ramadan retains its power over hearts. That enduring impact is not human-made. It is the effect of Allah placing blessing into time itself. When Allah blesses time, it transforms behavior, priorities, and intentions. A single sincere moment in Ramadan can outweigh months of heedlessness outside it. This is why the righteous would prepare for Ramadan long before it arrived and grieve when it departed. They understood that Allah's choice makes this month irreplaceable. The second key reason Ramadan is the most blessed month is that the Qur'an was revealed in it. The Qur'an is Allah's direct speech, the ultimate guidance for humanity, and its revelation marks the greatest moment in human history. That Allah chose Ramadan as the time for this revelation elevates the month beyond comparison. Ramadan is not only about self-restraint and hunger, it is about reconnecting with divine guidance. The Quran did not descend in a random season. It descended in a month already prepared to carry its weight, its light, and its mercy. The revelation of the Quran in Ramadan links the physical act of fasting with the spiritual nourishment of Allah's words. Fasting empties the body of excess, while the Quran fills the heart with truth. This pairing is intentional. When distractions are reduced through fasting, the heart becomes more receptive to guidance. Ramadan trains the believer to listen again, not just to recite the Quran, but to allow it to shape thoughts, actions, and intentions. The month reminds believers that true life is not sustained by food alone, but by connection to Allah's message. Because the Quran was revealed in Ramadan, this month becomes a season of clarity. Confusion that builds up throughout the year begins to lift when the Quran is engaged sincerely. Its verses realign priorities, soften hardened hearts, and expose habits that pull the soul away from Allah. Ramadan gives believers the space to encounter the Quran not as background sound, but as a living conversation with their Creator. This is why the early generations would drastically increase their relationship with the Quran during this month. They understood that Ramadan and the Quran are inseparable. The Quran's revelation in Ramadan also explains why transformation feels possible during this month. The Quran is not just a book of information, it is a force that reshapes character. When combined with fasting, its impact deepens. The hunger of the body weakens arrogance, while the words of Allah strengthen humility. The Quran calls the believer to self-accountability, sincerity, and God consciousness, all of which Ramadan is designed to cultivate. This alignment creates an environment where change does not feel forced but natural. Ramadan reminds believers that guidance is a gift, not an achievement. The Quran was revealed by Allah's will, not human effort, and Ramadan arrives the same way. Both are gifts meant to be received with humility and gratitude. When a believer approaches Ramadan through the Quran, the month stops being about endurance and starts being about enlightenment. Fasting becomes more than abstaining from food. It becomes a physical expression of submission to divine wisdom. Together, Allah's choice of Ramadan and the revelation of the Quran within it form the foundation of the month's unmatched blessing. Ramadan is sacred because Allah made it sacred, and it is powerful because Allah placed His words within it. Understanding this shifts how the month is approached. It is no longer seen as a routine obligation, but as a divine meeting point between the Creator and the servant, a rare intersection of mercy, guidance, and opportunity that may never return in the same way again. One of the greatest reasons Ramadan is the most blessed month is that rewards are multiplied beyond measure. In ordinary time, Allah rewards good deeds generously, but in Ramadan, that generosity expands in ways the human mind cannot fully calculate. A single act of worship carries a weight far heavier than it would outside the month. A short prayer, a small charity, a moment of patience, or a sincere intention can outweigh actions performed repeatedly at other times of the year. This multiplication is not symbolic, it is real, and it reflects Allah's desire to elevate His servants quickly and abundantly. The multiplication of rewards in Ramadan shows Allah's mercy toward human limitations. People are inconsistent by nature. They struggle to maintain high levels of worship throughout the year, yet Allah opens a season where effort yields exponential return. Ramadan becomes a spiritual accelerator, allowing a believer to make up for months of weakness in a short span of time. This is why actions that seem small, smiling, holding the tongue, helping quietly, carry immense value. Allah is not only watching the scale of deeds, but the sincerity behind them, and Ramadan amplifies both. This multiplication also changes how a believer views time. Minutes in Ramadan are not equal to minutes elsewhere. Wasting time suddenly feels heavier because the loss is greater. Every opportunity missed carries a higher cost, and every effort made carries greater potential. This awareness creates urgency. The heart becomes more alert, realizing that this is not a month to coast through, but a rare chance where even minimal effort can lead to massive spiritual gain. Ramadan trains the believer to value moments, not just milestones. Another aspect of this multiplied reward is that it applies not only to formal acts of worship, but to character. Patience while fasting, kindness when tired, restraint when angry, these inner struggles are seen and rewarded by Allah in ways that are hidden from people. Ramadan brings daily challenges that test sincerity, and every time the believer chooses Allah over impulse, the reward multiplies. Hunger becomes worship, silence becomes worship, and endurance becomes worship. The entire day transforms into a field of reward. This generosity also reflects Allah's encouragement rather than punishment. Ramadan is not designed to overwhelm believers with impossible expectations, but to motivate them with hope. When people know their efforts are multiplied, they are more willing to try, even if they feel unworthy or behind. The month invites those who feel spiritually bankrupt to start again, reassuring them that Allah's mercy outweighs their past neglect. The multiplication of rewards is Allah telling His servants that it is never too late to return. Closely connected to this is the fourth keynote. Sins are forgiven more easily in Ramadan. Forgiveness is always available, but Ramadan opens doors that feel otherwise heavy or distant. Hearts soften, repentance flows more naturally, and shame that once blocked return begins to dissolve. Allah creates an environment where turning back feels safe, welcomed, and encouraged. This does not mean accountability disappears, but mercy becomes more accessible for those who seek it sincerely. The ease of forgiveness in Ramadan is tied to the state of the heart. Fasting weakens desires that fuel sin and strengthens awareness of Allah. When the body is restrained, the soul has space to reflect. Guilt becomes clearer, but it is not paralyzing. Instead, it leads to humility. A believer begins to see their mistakes honestly without defensiveness or excuses, and this honesty is the doorway to forgiveness. Ramadan strips away distractions that normally justify sin and replaces them with clarity. Forgiveness in Ramadan is also supported by action. The month naturally pushes believers toward repentance through prayer, Qur'an, and remembrance. These acts polish the heart, making it receptive to mercy. Forgiveness is not just about words spoken in regret. It is about a heart that turns away from sin and toward Allah. Ramadan provides the structure for that turning. Night prayers, fasting, and charity all work together to heal spiritual wounds that may have gone unattended for months or years. Another reason forgiveness feels easier in Ramadan is because the believer is surrounded by collective repentance. There is power in knowing others are seeking Allah at the same time. This shared atmosphere removes isolation and despair. All of this reinforces the idea that Allah is calling, not rejecting. Forgiveness becomes a shared hope rather than a private struggle. The ease of forgiveness in Ramadan should not lead to complacency, but gratitude. Knowing that Allah is more forgiving during this month should push the believer to take repentance seriously, not lightly. Ramadan is not a license to sin, but a chance to cleanse. Each forgiven sin lightens the heart, making worship sweeter and faith stronger. The believer begins to experience what it feels like to live without the weight of constant spiritual regret. Together, the multiplication of rewards and the ease of forgiveness reveal the true nature of Ramadan. It is a month where Allah gives more than He takes. He asks for restraint, but gives multiplied reward. He invites repentance and responds with mercy. Understanding this transforms how Ramadan is approached. It stops being seen as a test of endurance and becomes an opportunity for renewal. The believer realizes that this month is not about perfection but direction, moving closer to Allah through hope, effort, and sincere return. One of the most powerful signs that Ramadan is the most blessed month is that the gates of Jannah are open. This opening is not symbolic or poetic. It reflects a real increase in divine mercy and access to Allah's pleasure. When the gates of Jannah are opened, it means the paths that lead to Allah are made clearer and easier. Acts of worship are facilitated, hearts are softened, and excuses that normally hold people back lose their strength. Ramadan becomes a month where the road to Allah feels less obstructed, as if the distance between the servant and their Lord has been shortened. The opening of Jannah's gates also reshapes how a believer views hope. Outside of Ramadan, a person may feel burdened by their past, convinced that their mistakes outweigh their good. But Ramadan arrives with a different message. Allah is inviting His servants in. The open gates signal acceptance, not rejection. They tell the believer that no matter how heavy their sins feel, Allah's mercy is greater. This creates a sense of spiritual safety, where returning to Allah does not feel humiliating but dignified and welcomed. This openness encourages consistency rather than perfection. When the gates of Jannah are open, small deeds matter more because they are stepping stones rather than isolated actions. A believer may begin with something simple, guarding the tongue, praying on time, giving quietly, and find that these actions naturally lead to more. Ramadan removes the feeling that one must be flawless to be accepted. Instead, effort is honored, sincerity is rewarded, and persistence is nurtured. The open gates also remind believers that Jannah is not only a future destination, but a present motivation. Every fast kept sincerely, every prayer performed with humility, every temptation resisted is directly connected to that open door. Ramadan trains the heart to live with Jannah in mind, not as a distant concept, but as an active goal shaping daily choices. This awareness elevates ordinary moments into acts of worship and gives purpose to struggle. Alongside this mercy is the sixth keynote. The gates of Jahannam are closed. This closure represents Allah's protection over His servants during Ramadan. It does not mean accountability disappears, but it means Allah reduces the forces that drag people toward destruction. The paths that normally lead to sin feel heavier, more uncomfortable, and less appealing. A believer notices that actions once taken lightly now carry an inner resistance. This resistance is a mercy, not a restriction. The closing of Jahannam's gates highlights Allah's desire to save rather than punish. Ramadan is structured to pull people away from self-destruction. Fasting weakens the ego. Prayer strengthens awareness, and remembrance calms desires. Together, these acts create a barrier between the believer and habitual sin. Allah does not merely command people to stop wrongdoing. He provides an environment where stopping becomes easier. This protection also exposes the true nature of certain habits. When sinful urges feel weaker in Ramadan, it becomes clear that many struggles were not as uncontrollable as they once seemed. Ramadan reveals that discipline is possible and that change is achievable. The believer begins to see that with the right support and intention, distance from sin is not a fantasy but a reality. This realization builds confidence and responsibility. The closing of Jahannam's gates also deepens accountability. When sin becomes harder during Ramadan, choosing it becomes more deliberate. This clarity forces honest self-reflection. A believer can no longer blame circumstances alone. They must confront their intention. At the same time, this makes repentance more sincere. When a person turns away from sin despite ease of temptation, the return to Allah is stronger and more meaningful. Together, the opening of Jannah's gates and the closing of Jahannam's gates create a powerful spiritual balance. Ramadan is not neutral ground. It is tilted heavily toward mercy. Allah removes barriers to goodness and raises barriers against harm. The believer is placed in a protected space where growth is not only encouraged but expected. This balance explains why Ramadan has the potential to transform lives. It aligns the heart with mercy and distances it from destruction. These two realities also remind believers that Ramadan is not meant to pass unchanged. When Allah opens doors to goodness and closes doors to harm, it is an invitation to walk through one and stay away from the other. Ignoring this balance is a missed opportunity. Responding to it with sincerity can reshape faith long after the month ends because it teaches the soul what life feels like when mercy is near and harm is held at bay.